Hey, what's going on everybody, and welcome back to the Whiskey Cove. And on today's episode, we delve into one of the most unique whiskeys that I've ever tasted and I've ever heard of. You know the drill, run the video. Alright then folks, before we get into today's video, quick update for you. If you haven't already heard, we are doing a 5,000 subscriber giveaway during a live stream. Yes, we're somewhat away from that target right now, but that just gives us more time to build up that giveaway. So far we have one bottle in the giveaway, and that is Old Forester Barrel Strength Single Barrel Pick, and we'll add some as we go along. I anticipate a couple of months to get to the 5,000, hopefully with your folks' help there. If you want to be with a chance to win one of these excellent bottles, you have to be a subscriber, and just keep a lookout for some updates in a couple of videos as we get closer to that 5,000 subscriber mark. With that being said, let's get into today's video. So like I said, this is going to be one of the most unique whiskeys that I've ever heard of, and I'll tell you why. That is the Suntory World Whiskey. Why is it called the World Whiskey? Well, I will tell you right now. This is a blend of Japanese, Irish, Scotch, American, and Canadian whiskies. So 5 different whiskies from around the world. This on the back goes on to say a little bit about that bottle. So this is, yes, it is a Japanese distillery company, or I guess Japanese-American, because it is Beam Suntory at this point, after Jim Beam. So this goes on to say that Irish, Scotch, American, Canadian, and Japanese whiskies are the world's 5 major whiskies. Suntory blenders carefully select malt and grain whiskies produced at Beam Suntory-owned distilleries in these 5 countries, and meticulously blend them to craft Suntory World Whiskey, which is what this is. So they don't disclose which distilleries that they source their whiskey from. They are all owned by Beam Suntory. So I did a little research, and these are what I came up with. So in America, Beam Suntory owned just Jim Beam. That's the only distillery that they're involved with in the US of A. So when they say American whiskey, it's coming from Jim Beam, coming from the Jim Beam distillery. And then when they talk a little bit about Canadian, they only own one Canadian distillery, and that is Canadian Club. So that's, well, is also in here. So not much of a great start so far with the Canadian Club. Third, then it's Scotch. So they own Balmoral, Teachers, and then Lefroy 2. So that's an interesting one. It's a pretty big distillery. So Beam Suntory own that. Moving over to Ireland, Kilbeggan, they own that, and then they also own Tyre Cornell as well. So potentially either one of those two might be the distillate in here. And then lastly, the Japanese, of course, they own Hibiki, Suntory, Hakushi, and a couple of other different ones as well. So it's going to be a blend of some of the stuff from each one of those countries, I should say. So I'm guessing, well, we'll talk a little bit more about which ones I think a little bit later. So let's take a little look at the label and the box here. So this did cost me only like $65 out the door. So very, very affordable considering what they probably had to do to get this juice to where it is today. A really cool and unique bottle. Comes in this really nice box. So this bottle has this kind of like diamond triangle type deal going on here. A really interesting bottle, something I've never really seen before at all. It has this really nice blue and gold label on the front. So AO is the name of this whiskey, which I believe is Japanese potentially. I think it says on the back of the box. AO is named after the deep blue or the majestic oceans that connect the world. So I think it just means like the deep blue or oceans in Japanese there. But like I said, really cool bottle, really well made, as most of the stuff does come from the Suntory whiskey. The Beam Suntory distillery. There is one thing that I do not like about this bottle, and they do with the Yamazakis a lot as well. They always seem to carry the cheap plastic caps. I don't know why they just never upgrade to corks. They just kind of cheap, really cheap. Think like Canadian Club cheap, maybe that's where they're getting it from. So let's pour this whiskey into the glass here. It's going to be interesting to see how these whiskeys all come together and kind of marriage, and see what flavors might dominate this. As you can see, I've already tried it because I couldn't wait. However, we'll delve into it as best we can here. Just looking at it in the glass, it is a little on the lighter side. Maybe more leaning more so to like a like a Scotch colour or an Irish whiskey colour. Definitely a little bit on the lighter side here. This is coming in at 43% ABV or 86 proof, so you probably will expect that as well. It does kind of look a little bit like Scotch in that glass there. Not much lace in, looks a little thin in the glass if I'm completely honest here. So then this is the Suntory World Whiskey Ale. Let's go in for a nose here. So there's a big note in this that kind of jumps right out, right away from the beginning. And that is peat. There's definitely an abundance of peat in this. Yeah. I've drunk a lot of Lafroig because, shout out to Michael, one of my friends here, his favorite whiskey is Lafroig, and mostly all the time we get together, we always tend to drink Lafroig 10. So I'm very versed in that note, and it's a big peaty note as well. This whiskey might be a little bit too much for people who don't like peated Scotch, if I'm honest. There's also some really nice stone fruit characteristics in the background there, maybe like a peach or an apricot. Maybe coming from maybe the more delicate notes of the Japanese whiskey or some from the Irish. There is definitely some vanilla and like a caramel sweetness that you can kind of get from what they call in the American whiskey in this. Not really picking up any hallmarks of Canadian whiskey, but generally I'm not the biggest fan of Canadian whiskey because it nose is quite ethanol-y and grainy for me personally. But yeah, peaches and cream with a touch of smoke and peat, I guess. It's a very complex and inviting nose, but I could see how you could be overwhelmed by the peat if that's not your cup of tea. Okay, let's go in for a taste here. Pretty excited about this. So first impressions. It's very sweet to begin with. You get that really nice bourbon kind of caramel vanilla sweetness that you might associate with a lot of American whiskeys. And this definitely has that there. But then you do get a little bit of spice. I'm not quite sure where that's coming from. Maybe it's Canadian whiskey, maybe it's the bourbon, more than likely from the bourbon. And as that spice is introduced, then that peat kind of kicks up and really dominates that mid palate there as well. And then towards the back end of that mid palate, I am getting more of those stone fruit flavors as well. That peaches and cream returns, that kind of ripened apricot is there too as well. Let's go in for another taste on this one. There's definitely a sense of a dryness and like a spice on the back end there. It definitely dries out really well, but not too much. I think that spiciness helps it a little bit there as well. I would say it does taste a little thin on the palate, as expected, thin in your mouth. Like it's not too thick and it's not too viscous. However, even though it's not oily in texture, it does a really great job at coating the mouth as well. And you do get quite a long finish here. And even just after about 20 seconds of drinking it, I do get like a little bit of smoky and spice, like a cinnamon, bacon spice note that kind of is just sitting on the top of my gums by my teeth there. And that smokiness and that peat is definitely still there. If you've drunk peated whiskey before, it's that finish is really long because that smoke and peat just kind of sticks around that medicinal note. But all in all, I think they've done a pretty good job of balancing out a lot of these flavors. Yes, I got kind of like the stone fruit that I associate with some Scotches, some Japanese whiskey, and maybe some Irish there as well. I didn't really get much of the Canadian. I would say the bourbon and the Scotch are the two that really dominate this. Not really honey forward as I would like a Japanese whiskey, or like a honeysuckle note that I kind of get from Japanese whiskey. But it's definitely bourbon and Scotch that dominate this palate there. And as you pick it apart even more, you pick up those stone fruits, those like ripened fresh fruits, and that kind of peaches and cream note is really nice there as well. So what we like to do on this channel, if you are new around here, we like to give a value for money between A and F, A being the best value for money, F being the worst. And then also we give it a rating from 0 to 100. But before we do that, I named off some distilleries in the beginning where I thought that it was. So American, the only one they own in America is Jim Beam, so there's obviously Jim Beam juice in there. Canada is the only one they own there is Canadian Club, so obviously Canadian Club juice is in there. Japanese is Hibiki, Yamazaki, or Hakushi. Probably Hibiki juice in here. maybe Yamazaki is probably a bit too more expensive because, like I said, this was about $65, so it's probably a little bit expensive of juice to put in here. So maybe like the standard Hibiki offerings, or maybe the Hakushi as well. Irish is probably the Kilbeggan, and then obviously Scotch, the Lefroy, because I've had teachers. I haven't had the Balmoral, but I have teachers, and it's nowhere near as peaty as the Lefroy, and that's definitely what I'm tasting in this. I would expect it to be a little bit spicy, like it has been if it has Jim Beam distillate in it, because I do find Jim Beam distillate on the spicier side. So I would have preferred something maybe a little bit more sweeter from the bourbon there. Like, think maybe if they were able to, obviously if they own for whatever reason Brown-Forman, I think that would have done a lot better in this than Jim Beam, because you have the smoke and like the peatiness, which is already somewhat spicy on its own, and then you get another layer of spice from the Jim Beam distillate. But if you had like a Brown-Forman distillate, more of a sweeter distillate, I felt like that might have balanced it out just a little bit better. But that's only my opinion. So like I said, $65 value for money. I think I have to give this an A, just because this is a crazy blend of a little bit of everything, and you have to respect the amount of probably legwork that brought it all together. So for $60, $65 out the door for this very unique, cool ass looking bottle, I think this is a bit of a no-brainer. If you're looking for something a little different, maybe a present for a person who drinks Scotch and drinks bourbon, I think this would be it. Honestly, I think this is a really good gift bottle, but just because how unique it is as well. That being said, what would I give the score out of 100? 100 being the best and 0 being the worst. I probably would give this a 66. I think that's a really good score for this bottle of whiskey. I think, like I said, that the peat tends to dominate a little bit, and that spicy note from the Jim Beam distillate doesn't quite do enough to balance it out, and you probably get a little more of the heat from the Canadian whiskey there as well. I would love to have tasted a little bit more of the Japanese and the delicate notes of Japanese whiskey, but when you're sitting alongside bourbon and peated whiskey, that's never really going to come to the forefront. And maybe as I drink through this bottle of whiskey and I get a little bit more acclimated to some of those flavor notes, I might be able to pick that apart a little bit more. But as it stands right now, the peaty and the spicier notes do dominate it. So I hope you enjoyed today's review. I think this is actually the first non-American whiskey review that we've done on this channel. It's been like a year, so I apologize for that if you're Scotch or Welsh whiskey fans that have stuck around this long. So hopefully this is a little something different that can join this all together, so to speak. I might open some other avenues into other reviews on maybe Scotch or Welsh whiskey or Irish, depending on how well this video is received. With that being said, if you like what we do around here, don't forget to consider subscribing to the channel as we drink through the world's whiskeys, literally through the world's whiskeys, one glass at a time. Cheers.